We have a right to be here, exercising our democratic right to protest. Protest the mass extinction. Protest.
The government declared a climate emergency in 2019, 3 years ago. To me, an emergency is an emergency. It doesn't seem like they're doing the opposite of acting in an emergency by actually giving permission for the very thing that's harming us to carry on, which I cannot get my head round. So that is massively a motivation for me, because it's just wrong. It's totally moral and wrong, yeah, I can't explain that to my kids. You know, in COVID, Boris was up on his podium, giving us updates all the time, and for me, that's how it should be now. Like, if the government have declared a climate emergency, why isn't someone on a podium every week telling exactly what their plan is and what's being done about it? But it's not happening, and the media, apart from The Guardian, don't seem to be are not covering it, and even joke about it, you know, about how warm it's going to be, etc.
A woman from Ecuador who said, like, when they go out and protest, sometimes people will be killed. And it made me think, well, I know I can go out on the streets in the UK and I never, like, think that I will be killed. But, like, protesters in Ecuador, they keep going out and it doesn't matter. And to me it was like, well, you know, what excuse do I have now, really? Yeah, I suppose for me, again, it goes back to motivations of, like, yeah, okay, in the system that we currently have, I can be viewed as a criminal. But I think if you just, like, look at good fights that people have had in the past, they've broken the law, but for something that's good. And yeah, it still sits fine with me what I did, and I don't see myself as a criminal. I don't stress about, you know, people viewing me that way. Even if they do, I just think that's fine. I mean, like, history will see in hindsight, you know, all the people that fought for good things at the time were viewed badly. So I don't really worry about it as much. There are people who really should be classed as criminals,
yeah,
and they get away with stuff. So that's the difference, I suppose. I think in my mind, the people who are doing things that are harming loads of people and just getting away with it, those are the people that are criminals. You know there are going to be angry people, because, like, it's just emotions that come up when something's in your way, or, like, anything like that. And disruption, especially traffic disruption, happens all the time for a multiple load of reasons, and when there's somebody there that you can direct that anger at, it is going to happen. Yeah, I guess, like, what could I say to the people who are angry at that time? Like, they're just feeling it.
But it is interesting when you talk to people, and, yeah, sure, people start from that point of, you know, super anger, I really hate you. But when you actually start asking those more open-ended questions of, you know, well, how do you feel about the future? Does it not concern you? Are you happy with the level of action our government's taken? Do you not feel there's more we should be doing? Very few people disagree with that. And so you then get the thing I hate, which is well, I agree with what you're about, but I disagree with the tactic, which is a difficult thing, I think, because ultimately the only reason why Extinction Rebellion, Insulate Britain, and Just a Boiler in the press is because of the tactic. The issue has been there for 30 plus years, and if we just created a little campaign group to write letters to MPs, there would be nobody who'd ever even heard of us. 84% of people in the UK could recognise Insulate Britain's name 3 months into their campaign. You know,
150 people.
150 people. 84% of the UK population. That is unprecedented. You couldn't buy that kind of media coverage. You couldn't make that happen. And that happened because they took action that was disruptive for a small group of people. For them it was very disruptive, but it's only a small group of people, and that brought it to public attention. And you get people like Caitlin Moran a year on after that writing in the Telegraph, insulate Britain was right. Why have we not insulated our homes when we've got a cost of living crisis? Yeah, that's Caitlin Moran. You don't get much more establishment than the Telegraph, and these kind of things are being written. Insulate Britain was right. So on the day, yes, it can be difficult. But again, when you start to unpick it, 9 times out of 10, what people will bring back to you are the kind of things that the media are putting out there. And I think one of the things that's been very clear is that the media loves to actually make a war between us and the general public. Because rather than the media going to the fossil fuel companies and saying, what do you think about these activists? They go to ordinary members of the public and say, what do you think about these activists? And we haven't got to fight with Joe Public. We've got to fight with the oil companies, but we can't get in front of the oil companies and in front of the media and in front of the politicians unless we actually disrupt. If we turn up and cause no disruption, nobody ever writes about it. Even the fact you're here talking to us, and it's an interesting angle, is because we all caused disruption.
It is really difficult when you're sitting there and people are shouting at you or whatever, because you don't, like I said, it's very surreal. I don't want to be sitting in a road. I want action to be, urgent action to be taken by the government and the oil companies to, let us transition to this green new future.
I really can't bear it when people say, you're stopping ordinary people. But I'm an ordinary person. I don't want to, upset people, but I feel I have a duty to.
It's never covered all the people who give you a thumbs up or shout, thanks for doing this for me, thanks for doing this for my kids, thanks for standing up for us. And they never ever cover that, and you never see that. But there are increasingly as well people who do that, but even probably we don't sort of record that or film that, but that does happen a lot.
On the day of my closing statement, I was on the Underground and I met a woman by chance who wanted to borrow a tissue, and she ended up asking what I was doing and where I was going. And she started crying, hugging me, taking selfies. I can't believe I've met one of you. My friends are going to be so excited. Thank you so much for using your white privilege like this. And it made me realise that, we have no idea how many people are supportive. As Kate said, you only hear about the really, really angry, vociferous ones. And that seems to be a really small minority of people.
One of the things we struggle with all the time is the utter hypocrisy of what we're doing. Yeah? Because, if we all go to London on the 21st of April to protest, it's going to be a huge impact, all of that travelling down there and all the rest of it. We'd probably do better all getting into bed, pulling the duvet over our head for a day and not doing it at all, yeah? And that's it. And that's what we have to live with all the time, is the constant hypocrisy of we are taking these major actions, we're doing these things that are really important, but to do them, we are having to burn fossil fuels to get there. Okay, maybe sometimes we can take an electric car or whatever, but that's not our fault. What we're campaigning against is not an individual putting fuel in their car. What we're campaigning against is the fact there is no choice apart from buying petrol to put in your car. 30 years ago, we could have invested in alternative ways of doing this. We could have a public transport system that meant we never had to drive around in our cars. We don't have that. So yes, what we're doing may look hypocritical, but we are in this society. We can't stop that. We were born into this society. And what we want to do now is change the society to actually make it better. So this isn't just about climate change. This is about system change. And that is why the politicians get upset at us. Because what we're actually doing is undermining the very heart of our society and calling into question the very systems and structures that exist. So, we're hypocrites, and I own that.
the very first arrest that I did was something called Rebellion of One, where I sat on the road on my own in Haymarket. But there were people around who'd be part of the support team, but it was meant to look like I was there alone, so I didn't interact with them. And it was an amazing experience. I mean, it's a bit like losing your virginity. It's kind of crossing a line, like this Rubicon of like, you have no idea what it's going to be like to be arrested and cross that line. But we did such a huge amount of build up for it. I had the support team there. It actually felt like a really spiritual, I don't know, like sacred experience. Kind of suddenly everything came to a halt, and yes, there were horns blaring and things, but I felt like hugely at peace and aligned with who I'd been created to be, and the arrest and things just became a part of that. So it's not the same as just sitting on your couch and thinking, right, I'm going to go and get arrested tomorrow. It's a huge, huge kind of journey to get to that point.
I would like to stress that I feel like it's still a very surreal prospect that I do these things, being the person that I am, because I do really consider, I do respect, I do feel like we're really, I feel very respectful of law and order, and I'm always, respectful and compliant when I'm arrested with the police. I do really value the police and what they do in protecting me and my family and my community. But it's become like we're in a climate emergency. What else is there? What other options are there really at this point?
For me, I definitely feel it was even if it's just the most minuscule drop in the ocean, but even for the people I know, the circles I move in, for people to think, oh my goodness, why would she do that? And even if that's all it did was to make people like, look at what's happening for themselves.
I mean, basically, I think it's really worthwhile because all of the actions and people getting arrested is just to get publicity to expose what's going on.
People forget that, Extinction Rebellion, they forget the rebellion part. We're rebelling because our governments aren't doing what they're supposed to do. They're not protecting us. If the government aren't going to be a good government, I'm not going to be a good citizen. Generations after us, they're still going to have, even if we stop emitting carbon now, they're still going to have a worse time of it for decades. It's like how bad we want that harm to be. And that's what the government are continuing to do. They're continuing to create harm and license harm. And so I'm going to just, keep being a part of a movement that's wanting to change that for the better.
On a personal level, I have no regrets about the journey I've been on in the last 2 or 3 years in activism, because it's changed me into being a different person, a better person, I think, and the things I've learned and the experiences I've had I'm not saying I did it for those reasons at all, but I'm saying I can look back and feel that I'm a much more of a whole, fully human kind of being, that I can hold my head up and say I've taken action and I've done things to protect the planet and protect people. And in that sense, I've been through some really difficult things, but it's been completely worthwhile because I've met some amazing people, and I've got that sense of having taken my responsibility for the world, or my part of the world, seriously.
I think the challenge we've got is that whilst we all think what we did was the right thing to do, actually even other activists in other parts of kind of like other movements are kind of like a slightly cross at us. And the reason why they're cross at us is in the last 2 years there has been no primary legislation on environmental issues from this government, but there have been 2 pieces of primary legislation on policing. So last year's police crime and sentencing bill that basically made lots of the offences that we've been involved in had their sentences between 2 and 10 times increased. Well, that affects other activists and other people in other organisations when they get arrested, so that made people not great at us. And now we've got the new policing bill before Parliament now, which is trying to criminalise even the thought of activism. So the very fact that we could all talk about something would be sufficient grounds to, if found guilty, to lock us up for a year, even though we've done absolutely nothing, making conspiracy a much easier charge. So I can see at the moment the government is almost, rather than focusing on what the issue is, it's focusing on us to actually make us more alienated and more pushed out from the rest of other environmental movements. And so why I believe this tactic at the moment is a good thing is it actually brings us back together again and says, no, we are one movement, we've got one thing that we're about. We may have had different tactics for how we do it, but you won't divide us, and we want to see some primary legislation about the environment rather than policing. I hope so. I hope that 100,000 people are there and people turn out. I hope that politicians looking out their windows at Westminster see us and know why we're there and realise how important this issue is. I guess the thing that makes me concerned is that it's still down to the media to report it in a way that actually means that, because 100,000 people is still a tiny proportion of the UK population, so 100,000 people, it needs to be reported in a way which is basically saying these people have come with a demand, and we all need to know what the answer to this demand is. So what is the answer to the demand? Rather than, 100,000 people came and they blocked a few roads, everybody's grumpy and cross and all the rest of it. So utterly focused on that demand. Let's have no more new fossil fuel licenses. Let's stop now. No more. We've got more than enough. Let's stop. And if we can have that being talked about and that being addressed, we'll have succeeded.